The silence in the briefing room cuts through the air like a blade through silk. Colonel Marcus Henley's coffee cup freezes halfway to his lips as Captain Sarah Chen delivers her assessment with surgical precision. Her voice remains steady, professional, untouched by the weight of what she's just revealed. The 12 elite operators around the mahogany table lean forward almost imperceptibly, their expressions shifting from casual attention to razor-sharp focus. Outside the reinforced windows of Fort Blackwater's Special Operations Command, the Colorado Mountains stand sentinel under a gray morning sky, but inside this room, something has fundamentally shifted. What began as a routine mission debrief has just become the moment that will redefine everything the military thinks it knows about emotional intelligence in warfare. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Sarah sits at the far end of the conference table, her slight frame dwarfed by the imposing presence of seasoned Special Forces operators. Her dress uniform is impeccable, every crease sharp enough to cut paper, but there's something about her posture that doesn't quite fit the typical mold. Where others sit with the rigid bearing of soldiers trained in absolute discipline, she maintains a fluid alertness that speaks of different training entirely. Her dark hair is pulled back in regulation style, revealing features that could easily be dismissed as too delicate for military service. But her eyes tell a different story, scanning the room with the methodical precision of someone who's learned to catalog threats and exits as naturally as breathing. The mission folder in front of her contains details that would make seasoned warriors pause, but she reviews the contents with the calm efficiency of someone reading a grocery list. Operation Nightfall, the document reads, a hostage extraction deep in hostile territory where diplomatic failure has left American assets stranded behind enemy lines. 3 high-value targets, including a captured intelligence officer whose knowledge could compromise ongoing operations across 2 theaters. The timeline is brutal, the odds astronomical, and the political ramifications of failure would reshape international relations for decades. Colonel Henley studies Sarah with the expression of a man who's built his career on reading people accurately. 27 years in Special Forces have taught him to spot weakness, vulnerability, and the kind of emotional instability that gets soldiers killed in the field. What he sees in Captain Chen sets off every alarm bell his experience has installed. She's too composed, too thoughtful, too willing to consider multiple perspectives before making decisions. In his world, hesitation equals death, and he's convinced that her approach to problem-solving represents everything wrong with modern military thinking. The other operators maintain the respectful silence expected during briefings, but their body language reveals varying degrees of skepticism. Major Rodriguez, a veteran of 4 deployments to Afghanistan, keeps glancing between Sarah and the mission parameters with barely concealed doubt. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, who leads the base's most elite extraction team, drums his fingers against the table in a rhythm that suggests impatience with what he perceives as academic theorizing rather than tactical planning. Sarah's background file lies open on Henley's desk, a collection of achievements that should command respect but instead reinforces his concerns about her suitability for high-stakes operations. Advanced degrees in psychology and international relations, language fluency that spans 7 dialects, and training records that show exceptional performance in every measurable category. On paper, she represents the new generation of military intelligence, but Henley sees only a dangerous departure from the aggressive decisiveness that defines successful special operations. The morning briefing routine has become a testing ground where Henley probes for signs of the emotional volatility he's certain lurks beneath Sarah's professional exterior. He assigns her to theoretical scenarios designed to reveal cracks in her composure, presents impossible choices that should trigger the kind of emotional responses that disqualify operators from field duty. Instead, she approaches each challenge with analytical calm that he finds more disturbing than reassuring. Fort Blackwater itself reflects the tension between old and new approaches to military excellence. The base serves as home to some of the most elite units in the American military, where selection rates hover around 3%, and failure means immediate reassignment to conventional forces. The culture here celebrates aggressive action, decisive leadership, and the kind of controlled violence that breaks enemy resistance. Sarah's presence represents an unwelcome intrusion of sensitivity training and emotional awareness into a world built on suppressing such considerations. The other officers have learned to navigate Henley's expectations through displays of masculine aggression and competitive posturing. They speak in clipped sentences that demonstrate certainty, make decisions with theatrical confidence, and approach problems with the kind of direct force that Henley associates with military competence. Sarah's tendency to ask probing questions, consider unintended consequences, and factor human psychology into tactical planning strikes him as evidence of fundamental unsuitability for special operations. During morning physical training, the differences become even more pronounced. While other officers attack obstacle courses with visible aggression, Sarah moves with efficient grace that accomplishes objectives without unnecessary drama. Her times consistently rank in the top tier, but she achieves these results through technical precision rather than brute force. Henley interprets this approach as lack of killer instinct, evidence that she possesses neither the physical dominance nor psychological ruthlessness required for combat operations. The weapons training range provides another venue for Henley's assessment of Sarah's emotional stability. He watches her handle firearms with competence that meets all technical standards while looking for signs of the hesitation or overcaution that he believes characterizes female soldiers. Her shooting scores place her among the top marksmen on base, but she achieves these results through methodical preparation and consistent technique rather than the aggressive confidence he expects from elite operators. Sarah's living quarters reflect the same attention to detail that marks her professional performance. The small apartment assigned to visiting officers contains nothing that violates regulations, but everything is arranged with a kind of systematic organization that speaks of someone accustomed to maintaining operational security. Books on military history share shelf space with texts on conflict resolution and cultural anthropology, a combination that Henley views as evidence of misplaced priorities. The evening social dynamics among Special Forces personnel reveal another layer of the cultural challenge Sarah faces. Officers gather in the base club to decompress through displays of competitive drinking, aggressive storytelling, and the kind of casual violence that reinforces group identity. Sarah's participation in these rituals remains polite but distant, engaging in conversation without fully embracing the testosterone-driven culture that defines acceptance within the group. Her approach to intelligence analysis demonstrates the methodical thinking that makes Henley uncomfortable. Where other officers present findings with absolute certainty, Sarah acknowledges ambiguity and discusses probability ranges. She factors cultural considerations into tactical assessments, considers psychological profiles when evaluating enemy capabilities, and consistently raises questions about long-term consequences that extend beyond immediate mission parameters. These habits strike Henley as evidence of the kind of overthinking that paralyzes decision-making under pressure. The morning routine continues, with Sarah arriving at the command center precisely 30 minutes before required reporting time. She uses this extra period to review overnight intelligence reports, update her understanding of evolving situations, and prepare comprehensive briefing materials that demonstrate thorough preparation. Other officers appreciate the quality of her work while remaining skeptical about her ability to perform under the kind of pressure that defines special operations. The incident that changes everything begins with what appears to be a routine intelligence briefing on a Tuesday morning in March. Sarah enters the briefing room carrying a comprehensive analysis of enemy communications intercepted over the previous 48 hours. Her report identifies patterns in terrorist cell movements that suggest an imminent attack on American diplomatic facilities in 3 different countries. The intelligence represents weeks of painstaking analyses, cross-referencing multiple sources, and building a complex picture of coordinated threats. Colonel Henley reviews her findings with visible irritation, his expression suggesting that he's already reached conclusions before examining the evidence. The briefing room fills with the tension that accompanies moments when personal prejudices collide with professional responsibilities. Sarah presents her analysis methodically, walking through each piece of evidence and explaining how the pattern emerges from seemingly unrelated communications intercepts. The other officers follow the presentation with professional interest, recognizing the quality of the intelligence work even if they harbored doubts about its source. Major Rodriguez asks pointed questions about source reliability and confidence levels, treating Sarah's analysis with the kind of rigorous scrutiny applied to all intelligence products. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes focuses on tactical implications, exploring how the identified threats might affect ongoing operations in the region. Sarah responds to each question with detailed explanations that demonstrate comprehensive understanding of both the intelligence and its broader implications. Her answers reveal knowledge that extends beyond the immediate analysis to include historical context, cultural factors, and psychological profiles of the key players involved. The depth of her expertise becomes evident through the precision with which she addresses complex technical questions without referring to notes or supporting materials. Henley's interruption cuts through the professional discussion like a sledgehammer through glass. His voice carries the weight of command authority as he dismisses Sarah's analysis with barely concealed contempt. The intelligence assessment represents exactly the kind of overthinking and emotional speculation that he believes characterizes female approaches to military problems. Instead of clear, actionable intelligence, he sees a compilation of possibilities and uncertainties that reflects fear rather than analytical competence. The confrontation escalates when Sarah attempts to explain the methodology behind her conclusions. She describes how pattern recognition in communications intelligence requires considering psychological factors alongside technical data, how understanding enemy motivations improves prediction accuracy, and how cultural awareness enhances interpretation of intercepted communications. Each explanation reinforces Henley's conviction that she approaches military problems with a kind of emotional sensitivity that compromises operational effectiveness. Other officers in the room exchange glances that reveal their discomfort with the direction of the conversation. They recognize the professional quality of Sarah's work while understanding the political dynamics that make challenging Henley's assessment a career-limiting decision. The briefing room atmosphere grows heavy, with the kind of tension that accompanies moments when institutional culture conflicts with individual competence. Sarah's response to Henley's criticism demonstrates the controlled professionalism that has characterized her entire military career. She acknowledges his concerns while maintaining that her analysis represents the best available interpretation of complex intelligence data. Her voice remains steady, her posture confident, and her demeanor professional despite the personal nature of the attack on her competence. The contrast between her composed response and Henley's emotional volatility becomes apparent to everyone present. The morning meeting concludes with Henley assigning Sarah to administrative duties that effectively remove her from intelligence analysis responsibilities. The reassignment carries clear implications about her perceived value to special operations, while avoiding the kind of formal disciplinary action that would require written justification. Sarah accepts the new assignment without protest, gathering her materials and leaving the briefing room with the same professional dignity she maintained throughout the confrontation. The aftermath of the confrontation spreads through Fort Blackwater's command structure like ripples across still water. Officers who witness the exchange find themselves divided between loyalty to established authority and recognition of obvious injustice. The incident becomes a topic of careful conversation in secure areas where honest opinions can be expressed without career consequences. Sergeant Major Williams, a 23-year veteran who served under multiple commands, observes the situation with a perspective that comes from witnessing similar conflicts throughout his career. His experience includes enough exposure to both competent female officers and insecure male commanders to recognize the dynamics at play. The intelligence analysis Sarah produced meets every standard for professional excellence, but the institutional culture makes challenging Henley's assessment virtually impossible. Sarah's reassignment to administrative duties involves processing routine paperwork that requires none of the analytical skills that brought her to Fort Blackwater. The work includes updating personnel files, coordinating training schedules, and managing supply requests with the kind of bureaucratic efficiency that keeps military organizations functioning. She approaches these responsibilities with the same methodical competence she applied to intelligence analysis, but the waste of her capabilities becomes obvious to anyone who understands her background. The administrative office where Sarah now works provides a different perspective on Fort Blackwater's operations. From this position, she observes the daily routines of special operations personnel, the logistics that support complex missions, and the communication patterns that reveal institutional priorities. Her analytical training makes it impossible to ignore inefficiencies and potential vulnerabilities that escape notice by those immersed in operational details. During lunch periods, Sarah often sits alone in corners of the cafeteria where she can observe social dynamics while remaining unobtrusive. The isolation isn't chosen for dramatic effect, but represents a practical response to the awkwardness that follows public humiliation in close military communities. Other officers struggle with how to interact with someone whose competence they recognize, but whose political position makes association potentially dangerous. The base gym provides another venue where Sarah maintains her physical conditioning while navigating the complex social dynamics created by her confrontation with Henley. She uses equipment during off-peak hours to avoid situations that might create additional tension, focusing on maintaining the fitness standards required for special operations personnel despite her current administrative assignment. Evening hours find Sarah in her quarters, continuing the analytical work that defines her professional identity even though it no longer constitutes her official responsibilities. She reviews open-source intelligence, follows developments in regions where American interests face threats, and maintains the kind of situational awareness that special operations require. The work receives no recognition or official support, but it represents her commitment to mission effectiveness regardless of personal circumstances. The pattern of marginalization continues over subsequent weeks as Henley ensures that Sarah's expertise remains unused in operational planning. Her administrative efficiency makes her valuable in her assigned role, but the special operations community loses access to analytical capabilities that could enhance mission effectiveness. The decision represents the kind of institutional waste that occurs when personal prejudices override professional judgment. Sarah's response to marginalization reveals character traits that Henley fails to recognize or appreciate. Instead of becoming bitter or confrontational, she maintains professional standards while looking for opportunities to contribute meaningfully to the mission. Her approach demonstrates emotional maturity that contrasts sharply with the volatile reactions that Henley associates with female emotional instability. The weeks following Sarah's demotion establish a pattern of systematic exclusion that permeates every aspect of Fort Blackwater's operational culture. Colonel Henley's campaign against her becomes more sophisticated, moving beyond obvious confrontation to subtle undermining that's difficult to document or challenge through official channels. He assigns her to tasks that waste her capabilities, while creating situations designed to highlight what he perceives as her emotional inadequacies under pressure. The morning briefings continue without Sarah's participation in intelligence analysis, but Henley ensures she attends as a note-taker, a role that maximizes her exposure to critical information while minimizing her ability to contribute meaningfully. She sits in the corner with a laptop, documenting discussions that cover operational planning, threat assessments, and strategic decisions that could benefit from her analytical expertise. The position allows her to observe decision-making processes while remaining effectively invisible to the key players. During these sessions, Sarah witnesses planning approaches that concern her professional instincts. Officers present intelligence with absolute certainty that masks significant gaps in understanding. Cultural factors that could affect mission success receive minimal consideration. Psychological profiles of enemy leadership remain superficial, focusing on military capabilities while ignoring motivational factors that drive strategic decisions. The methodical analyst in her catalogs these deficiencies while maintaining the silent note-taking role assigned by Henley. The base's elite operators begin adapting to Sarah's marginalized status in ways that reveal their individual characters. Some embrace Henley's assessment, treating her with the kind of dismissive courtesy reserved for administrative personnel who serve necessary but unimportant functions. Others maintain professional relationships, while carefully avoiding any actions that might be interpreted as challenging established authority. A few quietly express support through small gestures that acknowledge her competence without creating political complications. Captain Jake Morrison, leader of Alpha Team's Direct Action Specialists, represents the operators who genuinely question Henley's judgment while recognizing the futility of open opposition. His experience includes enough combat deployments to appreciate the value of thorough intelligence analysis, and he's observed Sarah's work long enough to recognize exceptional competence. During chance encounters in hallways and common areas, he offers subtle encouragement that stops just short of explicit disagreement with command decisions. The training schedules continue, including Sarah in physical conditioning and weapons proficiency requirements, creating situations where her capabilities become evident despite Henley's efforts to minimize her visibility. On the shooting range, her consistent accuracy draws attention from instructors who appreciate technical excellence regardless of political considerations. During close-quarters combat training, her precise technique and tactical awareness demonstrate competence that contradicts assumptions about emotional fragility. Master Chief Petty Officer Torres, a Navy SEAL liaison assigned to joint operations planning, observes Sarah's marginalization with the perspective of someone who's witnessed similar dynamics in multiple commands. His experience includes working with exceptional female operators in environments where competence mattered more than gender politics. The waste of Sarah's analytical capabilities strikes him as the kind of institutional stupidity that compromises mission effectiveness for personal reasons. Sarah's administrative duties expand to include coordination responsibilities that provide insight into operational planning she's officially excluded from influencing. She processes travel orders for missions she's analyzed, coordinates supply requests for operations she's helped design, and manages communications for teams that could benefit from her expertise. The irony of being simultaneously essential and excluded creates a surreal dynamic that challenges her emotional resilience. The evening social dynamics at Fort Blackwater reveal another dimension of Sarah's isolation. The Officers' Club serves as an informal arena where careers are influenced through personal relationships and political alliances. Sarah's presence at these gatherings becomes increasingly awkward as other officers navigate between professional respect for her capabilities and political awareness of Henley's hostility. Conversations pause when she approaches, resume when she moves away, and carefully avoid topics where her expertise might prove relevant. Henley's campaign intensifies through assignments designed to test Sarah's emotional stability under conditions he believes will expose her fundamental unsuitability for special operations. He tasks her with investigating minor administrative discrepancies that require uncomfortable confrontations with enlisted personnel. He assigns her to coordinate training exercises where male operators might challenge female authority. He places her in situations where failure seems likely and emotional responses appear inevitable. Sarah's approach to these challenges continues demonstrating the analytical thinking that Henley interprets as weakness. When investigating administrative problems, she explores systemic causes rather than simply assigning blame. When coordinating training exercises, she focuses on mission objectives rather than personal authority. When facing confrontational situations, she maintains professional demeanor while addressing underlying issues that create conflict. Her responses consistently contradict Henley's expectations while failing to provide the dramatic failures he seeks. The intelligence picture in Sarah's area of expertise continues evolving during her administrative exile, creating situations where her analytical capabilities become increasingly relevant to operational success. Communications intercepts reveal patterns that require the kind of sophisticated analysis she specializes in. Enemy movements suggest strategic shifts that demand understanding of cultural and psychological factors. Threat assessments require integration of technical intelligence with behavioral analysis that represents her core competencies. Fort Blackwater's intelligence section struggles with analytical challenges that Sarah could address effectively, but institutional dynamics prevent accessing her expertise. Junior analysts produce competent work that lacks the depth and sophistication of her approach. Senior officers provide oversight based on operational experience rather than analytical training. The gap between available capabilities and utilized expertise grows wider as complex threats demand increasingly sophisticated responses. The base communication systems carry an increasing volume of classified traffic related to developing situations in Sarah's areas of expertise. Regional tensions escalate in ways that match patterns she identified in earlier analysis. Enemy organizations demonstrate coordination and strategic thinking that align with her assessments of their capabilities. The intelligence picture confirms her analytical accuracy while highlighting the cost of marginalizing her contributions. Sarah's personal routine adapts to the reality of professional isolation while maintaining the standards required for special operations personnel. Her physical conditioning continues meeting elite requirements despite administrative assignment. Her technical skills remain sharp through personal study and unofficial analysis. Her situational awareness encompasses both immediate security concerns and broader strategic developments that affect American interests globally. The psychological pressure of sustained marginalization tests emotional resilience in ways that combat stress cannot replicate. Combat presents clear enemies and defined objectives where success and failure have obvious meanings. Professional isolation creates ambiguous threats and uncertain objectives where emotional responses lack clear targets. Sarah navigates this challenge through the same analytical approach she applies to intelligence problems, treating her situation as a complex system requiring systematic understanding rather than emotional reaction. Henley's satisfaction with Sarah's marginalization reveals his fundamental misunderstanding of both her character and her capabilities. He interprets her professional response to unfair treatment as evidence of the emotional control problems he expected to expose. Her continued competence in assigned duties frustrates his expectation that stress would reveal underlying instability. The gap between his assessment and her actual performance grows wider while remaining invisible to his prejudiced perspective. The stage sets for larger tests as international developments create demands for exactly the kind of analytical expertise that Sarah possesses, but that institutional dynamics prevent utilizing effectively. Master Chief Torres begins his unofficial investigation into Sarah's background during a routine evening in the Base Communications Center. His decades of experience in special operations have taught him to recognize when exceptional talent is being wasted, and Sarah's marginalization triggers instincts honed through years of identifying valuable assets in complex operational environments. The secure terminals in the communications facility provide access to personnel databases that reveal fragments of information about her previous assignments, though significant portions remain classified above his clearance level. The initial searches return standard personnel records that document Sarah's conventional military career progression, but Torres notices gaps and inconsistencies that suggest a more complex history. Assignment periods that don't align with official training schedules, deployment records with redacted locations, and commendations for undisclosed operations create a pattern familiar to anyone who's worked in classified environments. These anomalies indicate involvement in activities that require security clearances beyond normal special operations requirements. Torres shares his preliminary findings with Sergeant Major Williams during a secure conversation in the base motor pool, where the ambient noise of generators and maintenance equipment provides natural counter-surveillance protection. Williams brings his own perspective from administrative oversight responsibilities that occasionally provide glimpses into classified personnel actions. Together, they begin piecing together evidence that Sarah's true background extends far beyond the intelligence analyst role she currently occupies. The investigation reveals communications patterns that suggest Sarah maintains relationships with personnel in highly classified units whose existence isn't officially acknowledged. Her official email traffic includes routine administrative correspondence, but metadata analysis reveals encrypted communications with addresses that trace to facilities not listed in standard military directories. The technical sophistication required to maintain these secure channels indicates access to systems reserved for the most sensitive operations. Williams discovers references to Sarah's participation in joint training exercises with foreign special operations units, activities that don't appear in her official service record but are documented in classified after-action reports he encounters during routine administrative duties. These exercises involve scenarios that simulate high-value target extractions in hostile territory, precisely the kind of operations that require the analytical skills Henley dismisses as emotional weakness. Her performance ratings in these classified activities consistently exceed standards for personnel several ranks above her current position. The deeper investigation uncovers academic credentials that complement Sarah's military training in ways that suggest preparation for highly specialized roles. Advanced degrees in regional studies and behavioral psychology from institutions known for producing intelligence analysts working in classified environments. Language training that includes dialects spoken in regions where American Special Operations conduct sensitive missions. Cultural immersion programs that prepare personnel for long-term assignments in hostile territories where blending with local populations becomes essential for survival. Torres contacts former colleagues who've worked in environments where Sarah's skill set would be relevant, using secure communication channels to gather information without triggering official interest. These conversations reveal consistent descriptions of a female analyst whose capabilities far exceed her official rank and assignment. References to successful operations where her contributions proved decisive in achieving objectives while minimizing casualties and political complications. The emerging picture contradicts every assumption Henley has made about Sarah's suitability for special operations. Instead of an emotionally unstable analyst unsuited for high-pressure environments, the evidence points to someone whose training and experience encompass exactly the kind of sophisticated operations that define elite special forces capabilities. Her analytical approach represents not academic theorizing but practical methodology developed through exposure to the most challenging operational environments. Sergeant Major Williams uncovers training records that document Sarah's completion of courses typically reserved for personnel destined for the most classified assignments. Advanced escape and evasion training conducted at facilities whose locations remain classified. counter-surveillance techniques taught by instructors from agencies that don't officially exist. Psychological resistance training designed to prepare personnel for capture and interrogation in environments where conventional military protections don't apply. The investigation reveals medical records that indicate treatments for injuries consistent with combat exposure, despite Sarah's official assignment history showing no deployments to active combat zones. Specialized medical care for conditions that result from prolonged stress in hostile environments. Psychological evaluations that document exceptional resilience under conditions that break most personnel. Physical therapy for injuries that suggest exposure to explosive devices and firearms in circumstances not explained by her official service record. Torres discovers financial records that show Sarah consistently declining promotions and prestigious assignments that would enhance career progression in favor of maintaining her current analytical role. The pattern suggests someone whose motivations extend beyond personal advancement to include mission requirements that aren't obvious from her official duties. Her willingness to accept marginalization rather than transfer to more supportive commands indicates commitment to objectives that transcend personal comfort or professional recognition. The communication intercepts that originally brought Sarah to Fort Blackwater become more significant when viewed through the lens of her true background. The intelligence analysis she produced represents not academic exercise but operational assessment based on experience in environments where such threats are encountered directly. Her recommendations reflect understanding gained through participation in missions where similar intelligence proves decisive in achieving success or preventing failure. Williams uncovers references to Sarah's involvement in planning operations that remain classified years after completion. Her role in developing extraction protocols for high-value assets in hostile territory. Her contributions to psychological operations designed to influence enemy behavior through sophisticated understanding of cultural factors. Her participation in joint operations with Allied Special Forces units conducting missions that require the highest levels of operational security. The pattern emerges of someone whose official assignment as intelligence analyst serves as cover for involvement in activities that require both analytical expertise and operational experience. Her marginalization at Fort Blackwater represents not just waste of individual talent, but potential compromise of ongoing operations that depend on her unique combination of skills and background knowledge. Torres realizes that Sarah's calm response to Henley's harassment reflects not emotional control problems but professional discipline developed through exposure to far more serious threats than workplace politics. Her analytical approach to intelligence problems represents methodology proven effective in operational environments where mistakes cost lives and compromise national security. Her ability to remain focused on mission objectives despite personal attacks demonstrates exactly the kind of emotional resilience required for the most demanding special operations assignments. The investigation reveals a fundamental disconnect between Sarah's actual capabilities and the institutional dynamics that prevent their utilization. Fort Blackwater's command structure operates according to assumptions about female officers that ignore evidence of exceptional competence in exactly the areas where such competence matters most. The cost of this institutional blindness extends beyond personal injustice to include operational effectiveness in an environment where analytical sophistication increasingly determines mission success. Sergeant Major Williams discovers that Sarah's current assignment may serve purposes beyond punishment for challenging established authority. Her presence at Fort Blackwater coincides with increased intelligence activity in regions where her expertise proves most relevant. The timing suggests that her assignment serves operational requirements that remain invisible to personnel not cleared for the most sensitive information. The confrontation with Henley may represent an unintended complication in a larger mission that requires her continued presence despite personal costs. The emerging picture transforms understanding of the situation from simple workplace conflict to potential compromise of national security assets through institutional prejudice and personal insecurity. The crisis that will test every assumption about Sarah's capabilities arrives through encrypted channels on a fog-shrouded Thursday morning in late April. The secure communication systems at Fort Blackwater receive priority traffic that triggers immediate alerts across the Special Operations Command structure. Colonel Henley enters the crisis briefing room to find his senior staff assembled around displays showing satellite imagery of a compound deep in hostile territory where American assets face imminent execution. The situation briefing reveals a hostage scenario that represents every Special Operations commander's nightmare. 3 American intelligence officers captured during a reconnaissance mission gone wrong now face public execution within 72 hours. Their captors represent a sophisticated terrorist organization with access to advanced surveillance technology and military-grade weapons. The compound's location in mountainous terrain provides natural defensive advantages while complicating extraction attempts through conventional approaches. Intelligence analysis indicates the hostages possess knowledge of ongoing operations that could compromise American assets across multiple theaters if extracted through interrogation. The terrorist organization demonstrates awareness of this intelligence value through communications intercepted by National Security Agency facilities. Their demands include prisoner releases and policy changes that exceed any realistic negotiation parameters, making diplomatic solutions impossible within the timeline constraints. Henley reviews extraction options with his senior staff, while Sarah continues her administrative duties in an adjacent office, processing routine paperwork that seems absurdly mundane compared to the life-or-death decisions being made nearby. The initial planning session reveals the complexity of challenges facing any rescue attempt. The compound's defensive preparations include overlapping fields of fire, sophisticated early warning systems, and backup positions that could allow defenders to execute hostages before extraction teams reach their location. The terrorist organization's communication security prevents electronic surveillance from providing detailed intelligence about internal compound layouts, guard rotations, or hostage locations within the facility. Satellite imagery reveals external structures but cannot penetrate hardened buildings where prisoners might be held. Human intelligence assets in the region lack access to information about the specific compound or the organization's operational procedures. Captain Morrison presents the assessment from Alpha Team specialists, emphasizing the tactical challenges posed by the compound's defensive advantages and the terrorists' demonstrated competence in military operations. The terrain approach routes offer minimal concealment while exposing extraction teams to coordinated defensive fire from prepared positions. The timeline constraints prevent elaborate deception operations that might reduce risks through misdirection or psychological warfare. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes outlines the aerial support options available for the operation, noting limitations imposed by the compound's location near populated areas where civilian casualties could create international incidents. Close air support missions face restrictions from surface-to-air missile threats that intelligence reports indicate the terrorists possess. Helicopter insertion and extraction operations must contend with altitude limitations and weather conditions that reduce operational flexibility. The planning discussions reveal gaps in available intelligence that complicate every aspect of mission development. The terrorist organization's leadership structure remains unclear, making it difficult to predict responses to various tactical approaches. The hostages' current physical condition and exact location within the compound represent critical unknowns that affect extraction timing and procedures. The defenders' weapons capabilities and training levels cannot be assessed accurately through available intelligence sources. Sarah's expertise in psychological analysis and cultural factors becomes increasingly relevant as planning sessions encounter problems that conventional military approaches cannot address effectively. The terrorist organization's behavioral patterns suggest decision-making processes influenced by religious and cultural factors that traditional intelligence analysis fails to consider adequately. Their communication style indicates leadership dynamics that could be exploited through sophisticated psychological operations. Henley's frustration with planning challenges leads to increasingly aggressive approaches that prioritize decisive action over careful analysis. His preferred options involve direct assault methods that rely on superior firepower and tactical training to overcome defensive advantages through aggressive application of violence. The approach reflects his conviction that special operations succeed through superior warrior mentality rather than intellectual sophistication. The planning sessions extend through multiple 12-hour cycles, as various extraction scenarios encounter insurmountable obstacles that force repeated revisions of operational concepts. Conventional approaches fail to address the combination of defensive advantages, timeline constraints, and intelligence limitations that define the hostage situation. Each proposed solution creates new problems that require additional complications that strain available resources and capabilities. Sarah observes these struggles from her administrative position while maintaining focus on routine duties that seem increasingly meaningless compared to the operational crisis developing nearby. Her analytical training makes it impossible to ignore the planning deficiencies she witnesses through overheard conversations and glimpsed briefing materials. The approaches being considered reflect tactical thinking that ignores psychological and cultural factors essential for success in complex hostage situations. The terrorist organization's public communications reveals psychological warfare strategies designed to create pressure for hasty rescue attempts that would likely result in hostage deaths and American casualties. Their propaganda operations demonstrate sophisticated understanding of media dynamics and political sensitivities that affect decision-making in democratic societies. The combination of deadline pressure and public attention creates conditions that favor defenders while limiting options for extraction forces. Master Chief Torres recognizes the operational requirements emerging from the hostage crisis align precisely with Sarah's specialized capabilities, but institutional dynamics prevent accessing her expertise through official channels. His informal investigation has revealed background knowledge and analytical skills that could prove decisive in developing effective extraction strategies. The gap between available expertise and utilized capabilities becomes a source of professional frustration that conflicts with mission-first priorities. Intelligence updates continue arriving through secure channels as various agencies contribute information about the terrorist organization, the compound's defensive preparations, and regional factors that affect operational planning. The accumulating data creates an increasingly complex picture that requires sophisticated analysis to identify actionable opportunities for successful extraction operations. The volume and complexity of information exceed the analytical capabilities of personnel currently assigned to the mission. Henley's growing desperation leads to consideration of increasingly risky approaches that prioritize speed over careful planning. His preference for direct action solutions reflects conviction that complex problems require simple answers applied with overwhelming force. The philosophy worked effectively in previous operations against less sophisticated opponents, but the current situation presents challenges that resist resolution through conventional special operations methodologies. The timeline pressure intensifies as intercepted communications indicate the terrorist organization may accelerate their execution schedule in response to detected American military preparations. Intelligence suggests they possess surveillance capabilities that provide awareness of deployment activities at bases supporting potential rescue operations. The defensive preparations at the compound show evidence of anticipation for extraction attempts, indicating sophisticated understanding of American special operations capabilities and limitations. Sarah's position allows her to observe the growing frustration among planning staff as conventional approaches fail to provide viable solutions within acceptable risk parameters. The administrative duties she performs include coordinating communication channels that carry increasingly urgent traffic related to the hostage situation. Her professional instincts recognize patterns in the available intelligence that suggest approaches not being considered by the official planning process. The crisis reaches a critical juncture as senior commanders demand actionable options, while time constraints eliminate possibilities for elaborate preparation that typically characterizes successful special operations. The moment arrives when institutional pride collides with operational reality in the form of a desperate midnight briefing that will reshape Fort Blackwater's understanding of expertise and capability. Colonel Henley stands before his assembled staff with the weight of 3 American lives pressing against his shoulders and 72 hours compressed into an impossible timeline. The conventional extraction plans scattered across the briefing room table represent 18 hours of intensive planning that has produced nothing but tactical dead ends and unacceptable casualty projections. The terrorist compound's defensive advantages have proven insurmountable through traditional special operations approaches. Every assault route ends in predicted failure. Every stealth approach encounters surveillance systems that eliminate surprise. Every aerial option faces anti-aircraft capabilities that ensure heavy losses among extraction forces. The intelligence picture remains incomplete in critical areas, where success depends on understanding psychological factors and cultural dynamics that conventional military analysis cannot penetrate effectively. Sarah enters the briefing room carrying a stack of administrative forms that require Henley's signature, her presence barely acknowledged by officers consumed with operational planning. Challenges. She moves quietly to the corner designated for support personnel, maintaining the invisible administrative role that has defined her position since the confrontation that marginalized her analytical capabilities. The irony of her exclusion from discussions where her expertise could prove decisive creates tension that fills the room, like compressed air waiting for release. Captain Morrison breaks the silence by acknowledging what everyone understands but no one wants to articulate directly. The conventional approaches have failed to produce viable extraction options within acceptable risk parameters. The terrorist organization's sophisticated preparations and defensive advantages require analytical capabilities that exceed current planning resources. The hostage situation demands exactly the kind of cultural understanding and psychological analysis that Fort Blackwater's command structure has systematically dismissed as emotional weakness. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes suggests requesting analytical support from regional specialists who might provide insights into the terrorist organization's decision-making processes and potential vulnerabilities. The proposal faces timeline constraints that eliminate possibilities for bringing external expertise to bear on immediate operational requirements. The hostage execution schedule allows no time for bureaucratic coordination with agencies that might possess relevant analytical capabilities. Master Chief Torres observes the planning impasse with growing frustration born from knowledge that essential expertise sits marginalized in the corner of the briefing room. His informal investigation has revealed Sarah's background in exactly the kind of sophisticated operations that the current situation demands. The gap between available capabilities and institutional willingness to utilize them represents professional negligence that could cost American lives through stubborn adherence to prejudiced assumptions. Sergeant Major Williams recognizes the critical moment when operational requirements must override personal politics and institutional biases. His administrative oversight responsibilities have provided glimpses into Sarah's true background and capabilities that suggest solutions to problems currently paralyzing the planning process. The choice between maintaining command authority and achieving mission success crystallizes into a decision that will define careers and potentially save lives. Sarah's position in the corner provides her with complete access to planning discussions while maintaining the administrative invisibility that Henley's marginalization campaign requires. Her analytical training makes it impossible to ignore the fundamental errors in approach that characterize the conventional planning efforts. The terrorist organization's behavioral patterns reveal psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited through sophisticated understanding of cultural and religious factors affecting their decision-making processes. The breakthrough comes when Sarah quietly approaches the briefing table during a moment when frustration has temporarily silenced the senior officers. Her voice carries the controlled confidence of someone who understands the solution to problems that have defeated conventional approaches. The psychological profile she presents of the terrorist organization reveals decision-making patterns that create opportunities for extraction operations designed around cultural manipulation rather than superior firepower. Her analysis identifies the terrorist leadership's psychological vulnerabilities through understanding of religious beliefs and cultural values that influence their strategic thinking. The compound's defensive preparations reflect doctrinal approaches that create predictable patterns of behavior. The hostage situation serves propaganda purposes that could be manipulated through sophisticated psychological operations, designed to exploit the organization's internal tensions and leadership conflicts. The extraction strategy Sarah proposes represents a fundamental departure from conventional special operations methodologies. Instead of overwhelming force applied through superior tactics and equipment, she suggests psychological manipulation designed to create conditions where the terrorists voluntarily reduce their defensive posture. The approach requires understanding of cultural factors and religious beliefs that traditional military analysis ignores in favor of purely tactical considerations. Colonel Henley's initial response reflects the institutional resistance that has characterized his treatment of Sarah throughout her assignment at Fort Blackwater. The psychological approach she suggests contradicts every assumption about military effectiveness and warrior culture that defines his understanding of special operations. The methodology appears to prioritize intellectual sophistication over aggressive action in ways that conflict with his fundamental beliefs about combat effectiveness. The room falls silent as Sarah continues her analysis, revealing knowledge of the terrorist organization's internal structure, leadership dynamics, and operational procedures that exceeds intelligence available through conventional sources. Her understanding demonstrates access to information and analytical capabilities that suggest involvement in classified activities, far beyond her official assignment as administrative support personnel. The psychological operations strategy she outlines requires coordination between extraction forces and information warfare specialists who can manipulate the terrorist organization's communications and decision-making processes. The approach demands precise timing and sophisticated understanding of cultural factors that could turn psychological pressure into tactical advantage. The methodology represents exactly the kind of analytical sophistication that Henley has consistently dismissed as emotional weakness unsuited for military operations. Captain Morrison recognizes the operational potential in Sarah's approach while understanding the institutional resistance that her suggestions will encounter from command authority committed to conventional methodologies. The psychological strategy addresses fundamental problems that have defeated traditional planning efforts while offering possibilities for success within acceptable risk parameters. The approach requires acknowledging that intellectual sophistication represents military effectiveness rather than weakness. The tension in the briefing room reaches critical levels as Sarah's expertise confronts institutional prejudices that have shaped Fort Blackwater's operational culture. Her analytical capabilities represent solutions to problems that conventional approaches cannot address, but utilizing her expertise requires abandoning assumptions about military effectiveness that define the command structure's understanding of special operations competence. The moment crystallizes into a choice between maintaining established authority and achieving operational success through methods that challenge fundamental assumptions about military culture and effectiveness. The decision will determine not only the fate of 3 American hostages but also the future direction of special operations thinking about analytical capabilities and cultural understanding in complex operational environments. Henley faces the recognition that his assessment of Sarah's capabilities may have been fundamentally wrong, and that his institutional prejudices may have compromised operational effectiveness in ways that extend far beyond personal politics to include national security implications. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The transformation begins with Colonel Henley's reluctant acknowledgement that traditional approaches have failed catastrophically and that desperate circumstances require abandoning comfortable prejudices in favor of operational necessity. His voice carries the weight of swallowed pride as he authorizes Sarah to present her complete analysis to the assembled staff, knowing that her expertise represents the only viable path forward despite his months of systematic marginalization. The briefing room atmosphere shifts palpably as officers who witnessed her earlier humiliation now recognize that their mission's success depends entirely on capabilities they had been conditioned to dismiss. Sarah steps forward from her corner position with movements that reveal the confidence of someone finally operating within her true area of expertise. The administrative facade dissolves as she approaches the briefing table with the assured bearing of an analyst whose recommendations have previously determined the success or failure of operations where American lives hung in the balance. Her transformation from marginalized support personnel to mission-critical specialist occurs in seconds, but the implications will reshape Fort Blackwater's understanding of competence and capability for years to come. The psychological profile she presents reveals the terrorist organization's leadership structure through analysis that penetrates beyond conventional intelligence to understand motivational factors, religious beliefs, and cultural dynamics that drive strategic decision-making. Her assessment identifies key individuals whose personal histories and psychological vulnerabilities create opportunities for manipulation through sophisticated information operations. The depth of her knowledge demonstrates access to intelligence sources and analytical methodologies that exceed anything available through standard military channels. Her extraction strategy abandons conventional assault tactics in favor of psychological operations designed to create internal conflicts within the terrorist organization that will reduce defensive effectiveness and create opportunities for successful hostage recovery. The approach requires understanding of cultural factors and religious interpretations that influence group dynamics and individual loyalty patterns. Her methodology transforms the hostage situation from a tactical problem requiring superior firepower into a psychological puzzle requiring sophisticated cultural manipulation. The operational plan Sarah outlines involves coordinated information warfare designed to exploit existing tensions between different factions within the terrorist organization. Intelligence indicates leadership disputes over strategic direction and resource allocation that could be amplified through carefully crafted propaganda operations. Her analysis identifies specific religious and cultural pressure points that could create divisions severe enough to compromise defensive coordination and create extraction opportunities. Captain Morrison finds himself re-evaluating every assumption about analytical capabilities and operational effectiveness, as Sarah's briefing reveals sophisticated understanding of special operations methodologies combined with cultural expertise that traditional military training never addresses. Her recommendations integrate psychological warfare with tactical planning in ways that could revolutionize special operations approaches to complex hostage situations. The intellectual sophistication she demonstrates contradicts months of institutional messaging about emotional weakness and analytical inadequacy. The timing requirements for Sarah's psychological operations strategy demand precise coordination between information warfare specialists and extraction forces operating according to cultural timetables rather than conventional military scheduling. Her plan exploits religious observances and cultural practices that create predictable patterns in the terrorist organization's activities. The approach requires understanding of factors that conventional intelligence analysis treats as irrelevant background information rather than actionable intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes recognizes that Sarah's cultural analysis addresses fundamental intelligence gaps that have paralyzed conventional planning efforts throughout the crisis. Her knowledge of regional dynamics, tribal relationships, and religious interpretations provides context that transforms disconnected intelligence fragments into comprehensive understanding of the terrorist organization's capabilities and limitations. The analytical framework she presents could enhance special operations effectiveness across multiple theaters where cultural factors determine mission success. Master Chief Torres observes Sarah's briefing with the satisfaction of someone whose informal investigation has been vindicated by operational reality. Her expertise represents exactly the kind of sophisticated analytical capability that modern special operations require to address threats that transcend conventional military challenges. The months of marginalization she endured demonstrate institutional blindness that could have cost American lives through stubborn adherence to outdated assumptions about military effectiveness. The extraction timeline Sarah proposes synchronizes psychological operations with tactical movements according to cultural patterns that create windows of opportunity for successful hostage recovery. Her analysis predicts specific moments when internal conflicts within the terrorist organization will compromise defensive coordination enough to allow extraction forces to achieve tactical surprise despite the compound's sophisticated security preparations. The approach requires trust in analytical predictions that conventional military thinking would consider unreliable speculation. Sergeant Major Williams witnesses the institutional recognition that months of systematic marginalization have wasted capabilities essential for mission success in complex operational environments. Sarah's analytical expertise represents the evolution of special operations, thinking towards sophisticated understanding of cultural and psychological factors that determine success in modern conflict situations. The transformation occurring in the briefing room extends beyond individual vindication to include fundamental re-evaluation of military effectiveness in culturally complex operational theaters. The intelligence support requirements for Sarah's psychological operations strategy reveal her access to classified analytical resources that far exceed her official administrative assignment. Her recommendations assume availability of information warfare capabilities and cultural intelligence assets that require security clearances and operational authorities not typically associated with base-level support personnel. The scope of resources she casually references suggests involvement in classified activities that dwarf her apparent administrative role. Colonel Henley faces the humbling recognition that his assessment of Sarah's capabilities has been fundamentally wrong and that his institutional prejudices have compromised operational effectiveness in ways that extend far beyond personal politics. The psychological operations strategy she presents represents analytical sophistication that could have enhanced every mission conducted during her marginalization. His campaign against her expertise has potentially cost opportunities for operational success across multiple theaters, where cultural understanding determines mission effectiveness. The briefing room dynamics shift completely, as officers who witnessed Sarah's earlier humiliation now recognize her as the mission's most critical asset. The psychological operations plan she presents requires capabilities that only she possesses among available personnel. Her cultural expertise and analytical methodologies represent the difference between mission failure with heavy casualties and successful hostage recovery with minimal risk to extraction forces. Sarah's final recommendations include long-term changes to special operations training and analytical capabilities that could prevent similar intelligence gaps in future complex operations. Her suggestions for integrating cultural analysis with tactical planning represent evolution beyond conventional military thinking towards sophisticated understanding of factors that determine success in modern conflict environments. The institutional changes she proposes would revolutionize special operations effectiveness in culturally complex operational theaters. The authorization to proceed with Sarah's psychological operations strategy represents Colonel Henley's acknowledgement that operational success requires abandoning personal prejudices in favor of professional competence regardless of its source. The decision transforms Sarah from marginalized support personnel to mission commander responsible for coordinating the most sophisticated extraction operation in Fort Blackwater's history. Her expertise will determine whether 3 American hostages live or die, and whether special operations thinking evolves beyond conventional limitations. The operation launches at 0300 hours, with Sarah positioned in the command center coordinating psychological warfare elements that will determine whether conventional extraction forces face impossible odds or manageable resistance. Her fingers move across secure communication terminals with the practiced efficiency of someone who has orchestrated similar operations in environments where analytical precision meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The transformation from marginalized administrative personnel to mission commander occurs seamlessly as she assumes control of information warfare assets positioned across 3 continents. The initial phase involves activating deep cover intelligence assets who have spent months positioning themselves within the terrorist organization's information networks. Sarah's psychological profile of the leadership structure guides targeted disinformation campaigns designed to exploit existing tensions between faction leaders whose personal animosities run deeper than their shared operational objectives. The cultural analysis she developed reveals pressure points where religious interpretation conflicts with pragmatic operational requirements, creating opportunities for manipulation through carefully crafted propaganda. Real-time intelligence flows into the command center, as Sarah's information warfare specialists execute coordinated psychological operations that begin destabilizing the terrorist organization's internal cohesion. Intercepted communications reveal growing conflicts between field commanders and political leadership over resource allocation and strategic priorities. The disputes follow patterns Sarah predicted through analysis of cultural factors and personality profiles that conventional intelligence gathering missed entirely. Captain Morrison leads Alpha Team through final preparations for extraction operations that will commence when Sarah's psychological warfare creates optimal conditions for tactical surprise. The extraction timeline synchronizes with cultural observances that Sarah identified as moments when internal conflicts would compromise defensive coordination. Her analysis predicts specific windows when religious obligations and factional disputes will reduce guard effectiveness enough to allow penetration of the compound's defensive perimeter. The terrorist organization's communications patterns shift dramatically as Sarah's psychological operations begin achieving intended effects. Leadership messages reveal increasing paranoia about internal security threats and potential infiltration by intelligence assets. The disinformation campaigns exploit cultural suspicions and religious interpretations that create doubt about loyalty and operational security within the organization's command structure. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes coordinates aerial support elements that will provide extraction capabilities once Sarah's operations create conditions for successful hostage recovery. The sophisticated timing requirements demand precise coordination between psychological warfare effects and tactical movements according to cultural timetables that conventional military planning never considers. Barnes finds himself operating according to analytical predictions that challenge every assumption about reliable intelligence and operational planning. Sarah's coordination of information warfare assets reveals the scope of resources available through her classified authorities that extend far beyond her apparent administrative assignment. Secure communication channels connect her with psychological operations specialists, cultural intelligence analysts, and disinformation experts whose capabilities suggest involvement in the most sensitive national security operations. The network she commands from Fort Blackwater's communications center represents analytical resources that dwarf conventional special operations support capabilities. The psychological pressure campaign intensifies as Sarah's specialists exploit religious calendar events that create internal tensions within the terrorist organization regarding appropriate responses to hostage situations. Cultural analysis reveals interpretations of religious law that conflict with operational requirements, providing opportunities for manipulation through carefully crafted theological arguments that undermine leadership authority and operational unity. Master Chief Torres observes the operation's development with growing appreciation for analytical capabilities that conventional military thinking consistently undervalues in favor of tactical superiority and aggressive action. Sarah's coordination of complex psychological operations demonstrates intellectual sophistication that achieves tactical advantages through cultural manipulation rather than superior firepower. The methodology represents evolution in special operations thinking that could revolutionize effectiveness in culturally complex operational environments. Intercepted communications reveal the psychological operations achieving intended effects as faction leaders within the terrorist organization begin questioning operational security and loyalty of subordinates. The conflicts follow cultural patterns that Sarah's analysis predicted would create windows of vulnerability during specific time frames when religious observances and factional disputes converge to compromise defensive effectiveness. The hostage compound's defensive preparations show signs of degradation as internal conflicts divert attention from external security toward investigation of suspected infiltration and loyalty problems. Sarah's psychological warfare exploits cultural tendencies toward suspicion and factional competition that reduce operational effectiveness through internal focus on perceived threats from within the organization rather than external extraction forces. Sarah coordinates final preparations for the extraction phase, as her psychological operations reach critical effectiveness levels that create optimal conditions for tactical surprise. The timing requires precise synchronization between information warfare effects and extraction force movements according to cultural calendars and factional conflict patterns that conventional planning methodologies could never accommodate effectively. The extraction forces receive authorization to commence operations as Sarah's psychological warfare achieves intended effects on terrorist organization cohesion and defensive effectiveness. Real-time intelligence indicates guard rotations compromised by internal security investigations and leadership disputes that reduce alertness to external threats. The conditions represent exactly the tactical advantages that Sarah's cultural analysis predicted would emerge from sophisticated psychological manipulation. Alpha Team begins movement toward the compound as intercepted communications confirm the psychological operations have created internal chaos that compromises defensive coordination. The terrorist organization's leadership focuses on investigating suspected infiltration and loyalty problems rather than maintaining external security posture. Sarah's cultural analysis proves accurate, as religious and factional conflicts override operational discipline at precisely predicted moments. The hostage rescue unfolds according to Sarah's psychological operations timeline, as extraction forces encounter reduced resistance from guards distracted by internal security concerns and leadership disputes. The compound's defensive advantages become irrelevant when psychological warfare eliminates coordinated resistance through cultural manipulation that conventional military approaches could never achieve. Communication intercepts reveal the terrorist organization's command structure collapsing under pressure from internal conflicts that Sarah's psychological operations amplified through sophisticated understanding of cultural dynamics and religious interpretations. The extraction proceeds with minimal resistance as guards abandon positions to participate in factional disputes that compromise operational effectiveness entirely. The successful hostage recovery validates every element of Sarah's analytical approach while demonstrating the operational effectiveness of psychological warfare based on sophisticated cultural understanding. The 3 American intelligence officers emerged from captivity through an extraction operation that achieved tactical surprise, despite the compound's defensive advantages and the terrorist organization's sophisticated security preparations. Colonel Henley witnesses the operation's success from the command center while recognizing that Sarah's expertise represents capabilities he systematically marginalized through institutional prejudice and personal insecurity. The psychological operations strategy she developed and executed demonstrates analytical sophistication that exceeds conventional special operations methodologies by orders of magnitude. Her success invalidates months of assumptions about emotional weakness and analytical inadequacy that shaped his treatment of her expertise. The extraction forces returned to Fort Blackwater with rescued hostages and comprehensive intelligence gathered during the operation that validates Sarah's cultural analysis and psychological operations methodology. The mission represents a watershed moment that will reshape special operations thinking about analytical capabilities and cultural expertise in complex operational environments where conventional approaches fail to achieve acceptable results. The debriefing sessions that follow the successful extraction operation transform Fort Blackwater's understanding of analytical capabilities and operational effectiveness in ways that extend far beyond individual vindication to encompass fundamental changes in special operations doctrine. Colonel Henley presides over comprehensive mission analysis that documents how psychological warfare based on cultural understanding achieved tactical advantages that conventional approaches could never have accomplished within acceptable risk parameters. The institutional recognition of Sarah's expertise represents acknowledgement that modern special operations require intellectual sophistication that traditional warrior culture has systematically undervalued. Senior officers from multiple commands arrive at Fort Blackwater to study the psychological operations methodology that enabled successful hostage recovery against seemingly impossible odds. The extraction operation becomes a case study in analytical effectiveness that challenges basic assumptions about military competence and operational planning throughout the special operations community. Sarah finds herself briefing generals and admirals whose career progression has been built on conventional approaches to complex problems that her methodology renders obsolete. The transformation extends beyond recognition of individual expertise to include systematic changes in training programs, personnel evaluation criteria, and operational planning procedures that integrate cultural analysis with tactical planning as standard practice rather than specialized support function. Fort Blackwater becomes a testing ground for evolved special operations thinking that prioritizes analytical sophistication alongside traditional military skills in personnel selection and mission planning processes. Colonel Henley's public acknowledgement of his fundamental errors in assessing Sarah's capabilities represents personal transformation that influences command culture throughout the special operations community. His willingness to admit institutional prejudice and systematic marginalization of essential expertise demonstrates leadership evolution that younger officers observe and incorporate into their own professional development. The acknowledgement becomes legendary within military circles, as an example of professional growth that prioritizes mission effectiveness over personal pride. Sarah accepts assignment as Director of Cultural Intelligence Operations, a newly created position that recognizes analytical capabilities as mission-critical rather than support function in modern special operations environments. Her responsibilities include developing training programs that integrate cultural analysis with tactical planning, establishing analytical methodologies for complex operational environments, and mentoring officers whose career progression now requires sophisticated understanding of cultural factors that determine mission success. The psychological operations techniques Sarah developed during the hostage crisis become standard curriculum in special operations training programs that prepare personnel for complex environments where cultural understanding determines tactical effectiveness. Her methodology represents evolution beyond conventional military thinking toward sophisticated integration of analytical capabilities, with operational planning that enhances mission success while reducing casualties and political complications. Master Chief Torres receives assignment as Sarah's deputy in the Cultural Intelligence Program, bringing operational experience that complements her analytical expertise in training development and mission planning applications. Their collaboration represents institutionalization of analytical approaches that bridge theoretical understanding with practical implementation in operational environments where cultural factors determine success or failure of complex missions. The training programs Sarah develops integrate psychological warfare with tactical planning in comprehensive curricula that prepare special operations personnel for environments where cultural competence determines mission effectiveness. Her courses include language training, cultural immersion experiences, and analytical methodologies that enable operators to understand and manipulate cultural factors that influence enemy decision-making processes and operational effectiveness. Sergeant Major Williams documents the institutional transformation for military education programs that will prepare future generations of special operations leaders to recognize and utilize analytical capabilities that conventional thinking has traditionally marginalized. His comprehensive analysis becomes required reading in military academies where officer development now includes understanding of cultural factors and psychological operations as core competencies rather than specialized support functions. The ripple effects of Fort Blackwater's transformation extend throughout the military educational system as academies and training centers modify curricula to include cultural analysis and psychological operations as fundamental rather than supplementary components of officer development. Sarah's methodology influences personnel selection criteria that now evaluate analytical capabilities alongside traditional military skills in determining suitability for special operations assignments. International allies request access to training programs developed at Fort Blackwater, as Sarah's psychological operations methodology demonstrates effectiveness in cultural environments where their own forces operate. Joint training exercises incorporate her analytical approaches in multinational operations that require sophisticated understanding of cultural factors affecting coalition effectiveness and mission success in complex operational theaters. The hostage rescue operation becomes the foundation for new doctrine that prioritizes cultural intelligence in mission planning for environments where traditional approaches fail to achieve acceptable results. Sarah's methodology influences strategic thinking at the highest levels of military command, where cultural factors increasingly determine the success or failure of national security objectives in complex international environments. Research institutions partner with Fort Blackwater to study the psychological operations techniques that enabled successful mission completion against seemingly impossible odds. Academic analysis of Sarah's methodology contributes to theoretical understanding of cultural factors in conflict resolution while providing practical applications for diplomatic and military personnel operating in culturally sensitive environments. The personnel evaluation systems throughout Special Operations Commands incorporate assessments of cultural competence and analytical capabilities that Sarah's success demonstrates as essential for modern military effectiveness. Officer promotion boards now include evaluations of intellectual sophistication and cultural understanding, alongside traditional measures of tactical proficiency and leadership potential. Colonel Henley's career experiences unexpected enhancement as his public acknowledgement of errors and commitment to institutional change demonstrates leadership evolution that senior commands value in increasingly complex operational environments. His willingness to prioritize mission effectiveness over personal pride becomes a model for command development that influences leadership training throughout the military educational system. Sarah's influence extends beyond military applications to include diplomatic and intelligence communities that recognize cultural analysis as essential for effective engagement in complex international environments where traditional approaches fail to achieve acceptable results. Her methodology influences interagency cooperation and training programs that prepare personnel for culturally sensitive assignments requiring sophisticated analytical capabilities. The memorial wall in Fort Blackwater's chapel receives addition of names representing personnel whose lives were saved through analytical approaches that prevented casualties in complex operations where conventional methods would have resulted in mission failure and heavy losses. Sarah's methodology contributes to operational effectiveness that preserves American lives while achieving national security objectives in environments where cultural competence determines success. The transformation of Fort Blackwater from an institution that marginalized analytical capabilities to one that prioritizes cultural intelligence represents evolution in military thinking that influences special operations effectiveness worldwide. Sarah's expertise catalyzes institutional change that enhances mission success while reducing casualties through sophisticated understanding of cultural factors that determine operational effectiveness in complex environments. The legacy of the hostage rescue operation extends beyond individual vindication to include fundamental changes in how military institutions evaluate competence, utilize expertise, and approach complex problems that require intellectual sophistication alongside traditional military capabilities. Fort Blackwater becomes a model for evolved special operations thinking that integrates analytical excellence with tactical proficiency in comprehensive approaches to modern security challenges. 5 years after the hostage extraction that redefined special operations methodology, Fort Blackwater stands as the premier training facility for cultural intelligence operations, where Sarah Chen now holds the rank of lieutenant colonel and leads the most advanced analytical training program in military history. The transformation from marginalized supply clerk to respected institutional leader represents more than personal vindication. It symbolizes fundamental evolution in how modern militaries approach complex operational challenges that require intellectual sophistication alongside traditional warrior skills. The Cultural Intelligence Operations Center that Sarah established occupies a state-of-the-art facility where analysts from multiple agencies collaborate on developing psychological warfare techniques for environments where conventional approaches fail to achieve acceptable results. Her methodologies have been applied successfully in 17 major operations across 4 continents, saving hundreds of American lives while achieving strategic objectives that seemed impossible through traditional military means. The center's reputation attracts the finest analytical minds from universities, intelligence agencies, and allied militaries seeking to understand cultural factors that determine modern conflict outcomes. Colonel Marcus Henley, now serving as Deputy Commander of Special Operations Training Command, has become one of the most vocal advocates for integrating cultural analysis with tactical planning throughout military education systems. His transformation from skeptical traditionalist to champion of analytical excellence demonstrates institutional capacity for growth that influences leadership development across the armed forces. The personal journey he underwent represents professional evolution that younger officers study as an example of adapting to changing operational requirements while maintaining core military values. The training programs developed under Sarah's leadership have revolutionized special operations personnel selection and development, creating operators who combine traditional military skills with sophisticated understanding of cultural dynamics and psychological warfare techniques. Graduation rates from these enhanced programs exceed conventional training outcomes while producing personnel capable of succeeding in complex environments where previous approaches resulted in mission failure and heavy casualties. The integration of analytical capabilities with operational training represents evolution beyond traditional military thinking toward comprehensive preparation for modern security challenges. International recognition of Fort Blackwater's innovations has led to establishment of similar facilities in allied nations, where Sarah's methodology influences multinational operations and joint training exercises. NATO headquarters has designated her analytical framework as standard doctrine for operations in culturally complex environments, while Pacific allies implement modified versions appropriate for their specific regional challenges. The global adoption of her techniques represents acknowledgement that cultural competence has become essential for military effectiveness in an interconnected world where local factors determine strategic outcomes. The academic partnerships Sarah established with leading universities have created research programs that advance theoretical understanding of cultural factors in conflict resolution, while developing practical applications for military and diplomatic personnel. Her collaboration with anthropologists, psychologists, and regional specialists has produced analytical tools that enhance operational effectiveness across multiple government agencies, working in complex international environments. The interdisciplinary approach represents innovation in applying academic expertise to practical security challenges that require sophisticated understanding of human behavior and cultural dynamics. Master Chief Torres, now Command Sergeant Major for the Cultural Intelligence Operations Center, oversees training programs that prepare enlisted personnel for analytical roles previously restricted to commissioned officers. His background in conventional special operations provides credibility with traditional military culture, while his commitment to Sarah's methodology demonstrates institutional support for analytical approaches that enhance mission effectiveness. The expansion of cultural intelligence training to include enlisted personnel represents democratization of analytical capabilities that strengthens operational effectiveness at all organizational levels. The psychological operations techniques developed through Sarah's research have been successfully applied in diplomatic contexts where military solutions proved inadequate for achieving national security objectives. State Department personnel trained in her methodology have resolved international crises through cultural manipulation and psychological pressure that avoided military confrontation while achieving strategic goals. The civilian applications of her military innovations demonstrate versatility of analytical approaches that transcend traditional boundaries between diplomatic and military solutions to complex international problems. Sergeant Major Williams, now responsible for documenting institutional transformation throughout the military education system, has authored the definitive study of how Fort Blackwater's evolution influences organizational change across the armed forces. His analysis demonstrates measurable improvements in mission success rates, casualty reduction, and strategic objective achievement in units that implement cultural intelligence training compared to those relying solely on conventional approaches. The empirical evidence supports continued expansion of analytical capabilities throughout military organizations facing increasingly complex operational environments. The memorial wall in Fort Blackwater's chapel has been expanded to include recognition of personnel whose innovative thinking contributed to operational effectiveness that prevented casualties and achieved strategic objectives through intellectual excellence rather than superior firepower. Sarah's name appears among those honored for contributions that saved American lives, while advancing national security interests in environments where conventional military approaches would have failed. The memorial represents acknowledgement that analytical capabilities deserve recognition alongside traditional military heroism in defending national interests. Sarah's current research focuses on developing artificial intelligence systems that can analyze cultural patterns and predict psychological responses in real time during complex operations. The integration of machine learning with human analytical expertise represents the next evolution in cultural intelligence capabilities that will enhance operational effectiveness while reducing dependence on individual expertise for mission-critical analysis. Her work pioneers applications of advanced technology to cultural understanding that could revolutionize how military organizations approach complex operational challenges. The success stories emerging from operations that apply Sarah's methodology have created demand for cultural intelligence training that exceeds current capacity, leading to expansion of programs at multiple military installations. The waiting lists for advanced analytical training reflect recognition throughout the special operations community. that cultural competence has become essential for career advancement and operational effectiveness. The institutional embrace of analytical capabilities represents complete reversal from the marginalization that Sarah experienced during her early assignment to Fort Blackwater. International conferences on military innovation consistently feature presentations of case studies developed from Sarah's operations, demonstrating practical applications of cultural analysis that achieved strategic objectives while minimizing casualties and political complications. Her methodology influences military thinking worldwide as allied nations adapt her techniques for their specific regional challenges and cultural environments. The global impact of innovations developed at Fort Blackwater represents American leadership in evolving military science toward comprehensive approaches that integrate intellectual sophistication with traditional military capabilities. The legacy of transformation that began with spilled coffee and escalated through systematic marginalization now encompasses fundamental changes in how military institutions evaluate competence, utilize expertise, and approach complex problems requiring sophisticated analytical capabilities. Sarah's journey from dismissed analyst to respected institutional leader demonstrates that true military strength emerges from recognizing and developing all forms of human capability, rather than limiting recognition to traditional expressions of warrior culture. Fort Blackwater's evolution from a facility that tolerated analytical marginalization to one that champions intellectual excellence represents institutional maturation that influences military effectiveness worldwide. The changes initiated through one person's courage to challenge established assumptions about competence and capability have created ripple effects that enhance operational success while reducing casualties through sophisticated understanding of cultural factors that determine modern conflict outcomes. The transformation continues as new generations of military leaders embrace analytical sophistication as essential complement to traditional military skills, ensuring that the lessons learned through institutional evolution at Fort Blackwater will influence military effectiveness for decades to come. The morning sun casts long shadows across the parade ground at Fort Blackwater as Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen watches the latest class of cultural intelligence specialists complete their final training exercise. 23 years have passed since the hostage extraction that transformed military understanding of analytical capabilities, and the facility she now commands has become the gold standard for preparing personnel to operate in the complex cultural environments that define modern security challenges. The young officers moving through their exercises represent the fourth generation of military leaders, whose careers have been shaped by institutional recognition that intellectual sophistication and cultural competence are as essential as physical courage and tactical proficiency. The training scenario unfolding before her mirrors the complexity of real-world operations where cultural misunderstanding can transform strategic victories into political disasters. The exercise involves a simulated humanitarian crisis in a fictional nation, where religious tensions, tribal loyalties, and economic disparities create a web of competing interests that conventional military approaches cannot address effectively. Students must develop comprehensive strategies that integrate diplomatic engagement, psychological operations, and limited tactical intervention to achieve humanitarian objectives, while avoiding escalation that could destabilize the entire region. Captain Martinez, one of Sarah's most promising protégés, leads a mixed team of intelligence analysts, special operations personnel, and cultural specialists through the final phase of their collaborative problem-solving exercise. Her approach demonstrates the sophisticated thinking that has become standard in programs developed under Sarah's leadership, combining rigorous analytical methodology with intuitive understanding of human behavior that enables effective engagement across cultural boundaries. The integration of diverse perspectives and specialized knowledge represents evolution beyond traditional military silos toward comprehensive approaches that address complex challenges through coordinated expertise. The observation facility where Sarah monitors the exercise houses representatives from 17 allied nations whose military organizations have implemented modified versions of the Cultural Intelligence Training Program. The international cooperation reflects global recognition that modern security challenges transcend national boundaries and require analytical capabilities that can navigate cultural complexity with precision and effectiveness. The techniques developed at Fort Blackwater have been adapted for operational environments ranging from Arctic communities to tropical archipelagos, demonstrating universal applicability of principles that prioritize understanding over force as the foundation for successful engagement. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, a cultural anthropologist whose academic research contributed to development of the training curriculum, joins Sarah in reviewing exercise performance while discussing ongoing refinements to analytical methodologies. Their collaboration represents the continuing partnership between military institutions and academic expertise that has enhanced operational effectiveness through theoretical insights and empirical research. The relationship demonstrates how intellectual humility and willingness to learn from diverse sources of knowledge can strengthen military capabilities without compromising operational security or institutional integrity. The exercise concludes with debriefing sessions, where students analyze their decision-making processes and evaluate alternative approaches that might have achieved better outcomes with fewer resources and reduced risk of unintended consequences. The reflective practice embedded throughout the training program encourages continuous learning and adaptation that prepares personnel for environments where initial assumptions may prove incorrect and flexible thinking becomes essential for mission success. The emphasis on analytical humility and intellectual curiosity represents cultural change within military institutions that traditionally valued certainty and decisive action over contemplation and careful consideration. General Patricia Stevens, the first female officer to command Special Operations Command, arrives at Fort Blackwater to observe training programs that have influenced her own career progression in strategic thinking. Her visit represents institutional recognition at the highest levels that cultural intelligence capabilities have become central to American military effectiveness in an interconnected world where local conflicts can escalate into global crises through misunderstanding and cultural insensitivity. The presence of senior leadership demonstrates continuing commitment to analytical excellence that extends beyond individual programs to encompass strategic planning and resource allocation across the entire special operations community. The afternoon briefing sessions reveal the scope of ongoing research projects that push the boundaries of cultural intelligence beyond current applications toward emerging challenges that will define future security environments. Sarah's team collaborates with technology companies, academic institutions, and international organizations to develop artificial intelligence systems that can analyze cultural patterns in real time while maintaining human oversight that ensures ethical application and cultural sensitivity. The research represents careful balance between technological innovation and human judgment that preserves the analytical sophistication that makes cultural intelligence effective while enhancing capabilities through advanced computational support. Master Chief Petty Officer Johnson, whose career spans the transformation from traditional special operations approaches to integrated cultural intelligence methodologies, shares perspectives with visiting officers about practical applications of analytical techniques in operational environments. His experience includes deployments where cultural understanding prevented conflicts that could have escalated into major regional instabilities, demonstrating measurable impact of training programs on strategic outcomes that extend far beyond immediate tactical objectives. The stories he relates illustrate how analytical capabilities enhance, rather than replace, traditional military skills in achieving comprehensive mission success. The evening social events at Fort Blackwater provide informal opportunities for cultural exchange between international visitors and American personnel, creating relationships that enhance cooperation in operational environments, where trust and mutual understanding determine mission effectiveness. The conversations that occur during these gatherings influence policy development and strategic planning in ways that formal diplomatic channels cannot achieve, demonstrating how personal relationships built through shared professional experiences contribute to international security cooperation that benefits all participating nations. Sarah's office contains artifacts and photographs that document the evolution of cultural intelligence operations, from experimental program to established military discipline with global influence and recognition. The displays include letters from former students whose careers have been enhanced through analytical training, testimonials from commanders whose operations achieved success through cultural competence, and academic papers that document theoretical foundations for practical applications that continue evolving through experience and research. The collection represents institutional memory that preserves lessons learned while encouraging continued innovation and adaptation. The research library established at Fort Blackwater houses the world's most comprehensive collection of materials related to cultural factors in military operations, providing resources for ongoing education and professional development that keeps personnel current with evolving understanding of human behavior and cultural dynamics. The facility attracts scholars and practitioners from multiple disciplines whose contributions enhance military effectiveness through diverse perspectives and specialized knowledge that complement traditional military education. The interdisciplinary approach represents acknowledgement that complex challenges require varied expertise working in coordination rather than competition. Colonel Henley's retirement ceremony occurs during the week of General Stevens's visit, providing opportunity to reflect on personal and institutional transformation that began with conflict over analytical capabilities and evolved into recognition that diverse forms of expertise strengthen rather than weaken military effectiveness. His farewell address acknowledges mistakes in judgment that temporarily marginalized essential capabilities, while expressing gratitude for educational experiences that enhanced his understanding of leadership and institutional responsibility. The ceremony demonstrates how professional growth and institutional learning can transform individuals and organizations in ways that benefit mission effectiveness and personnel development. The strategic planning sessions that General Stevens conducts during her visit focus on expanding cultural intelligence capabilities to address emerging challenges that include cyber warfare, space operations, and hybrid conflicts that blur traditional boundaries between military and civilian domains. The discussions explore how analytical methodologies developed for cultural understanding can be adapted for technological environments where human factors remain essential despite advanced computational capabilities. The planning represents continued evolution of military thinking toward comprehensive approaches that integrate multiple forms of expertise in addressing complex security challenges. The memorial service held annually at Fort Blackwater honors personnel whose contributions to cultural intelligence operations have enhanced mission effectiveness while preserving American lives and advancing national security interests through analytical excellence rather than superior firepower. Sarah delivers remarks that connect current achievements to sacrifices made by previous generations while emphasizing continuing responsibility to develop capabilities that serve broader purposes than individual or institutional advancement. The ceremony reinforces institutional commitment to analytical excellence as a central component of military service in defense of democratic values and international stability. The graduation ceremony for the latest class of cultural intelligence specialists includes representatives from government agencies, academic institutions, and international organizations whose cooperation has enhanced training effectiveness and operational applications. The diversity of participants reflects recognition that modern security challenges require collaborative approaches that transcend traditional organizational boundaries while maintaining operational security and institutional integrity. The ceremony celebrates achievement while acknowledging ongoing responsibility to continue learning and adaptation in response to evolving challenges that require sophisticated analytical capabilities and cultural competence. The legacy of transformation that began with individual courage to challenge institutional assumptions continues through ongoing commitment to analytical excellence that enhances military effectiveness while preserving human dignity and cultural sensitivity in complex operational environments. The final chapter of Sarah's remarkable journey unfolds 30 years after the coffee incident that triggered her transformation from marginalized analyst to architect of revolutionary military doctrine. At 59, Brigadier General Sarah Chen stands in the Pentagon's newly constructed Cultural Intelligence Operations Center, a testament to how far the military has evolved in recognizing and developing analytical capabilities that complement traditional warrior skills. The facility bears her name, an honor that represents institutional acknowledgement of contributions that fundamentally altered how America approaches complex security challenges in an interconnected world where cultural competence determines strategic success. The morning briefing she delivers to the Joint Chiefs of Staff addresses emerging global threats that require sophisticated analytical approaches to prevent conflicts that could destabilize entire regions through cultural misunderstanding and inappropriate responses. Her assessment integrates intelligence from 17 agencies, academic research from 12 universities, and operational experience from allied nations whose military organizations have implemented cultural intelligence programs based on methodologies she developed over 3 decades of service. The comprehensive analysis demonstrates evolution beyond individual expertise toward institutional capabilities that enhance national security through sophisticated understanding of human behavior and cultural dynamics. The room where she presents her findings contains senior leaders whose careers have been shaped by recognition that modern military effectiveness requires intellectual sophistication alongside traditional combat skills. Admiral Chen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, represents the new generation of military leadership that embraces analytical capabilities as essential for operational success in environments where conventional approaches fail to achieve acceptable results. The presence of diverse expertise in strategic planning reflects institutional maturation that began with Sarah's individual courage to challenge established assumptions about competence and capability. General Rodriguez, now serving as head of Special Operations Command, shares perspectives on operational applications of cultural intelligence techniques that have achieved strategic objectives while minimizing casualties and political complications in conflicts across multiple continents. His analysis documents measurable improvements in mission success rates and casualty reduction in units trained according to Sarah's methodologies compared to those relying solely on conventional approaches. The empirical evidence supports continued expansion of analytical capabilities throughout military organizations facing increasingly complex operational environments where cultural factors determine success or failure. The strategic assessment Sarah presents identifies potential conflicts that could be prevented through early application of cultural intelligence techniques designed to address underlying causes of instability before they escalate into military confrontations. Her methodology for conflict prevention integrates diplomatic engagement, economic development, and limited security assistance in coordinated approaches that strengthen Allied capabilities while reducing American military commitments in regions where cultural competence enables effective engagement. The approach represents evolution toward comprehensive security strategies that achieve strategic objectives through sophisticated understanding rather than superior firepower. Dr. Amanda Foster, director of the National Cultural Intelligence Research Institute, contributes analysis of technological developments that enhance analytical capabilities while preserving human oversight essential for ethical application and cultural sensitivity. The research includes artificial intelligence systems that can process vast amounts of cultural data while maintaining analytical frameworks that respect human dignity and cultural diversity. The integration of advanced technology with sophisticated analytical methodology represents careful balance between innovation and wisdom that preserves effectiveness while ensuring responsible application of enhanced capabilities. The briefing includes participation from Ambassador Thompson, whose diplomatic career has been enhanced through cultural intelligence training that enabled successful resolution of international crises without military intervention. Her experiences demonstrate civilian applications of analytical techniques originally developed for military operations, illustrating versatility of approaches that transcend traditional boundaries between diplomatic and security solutions to complex international problems. The cross-pollination between military and diplomatic applications has strengthened both communities while advancing American interests through comprehensive engagement strategies. Sarah's grandson, Lieutenant Michael Chen, represents the third generation of her family to serve in military organizations that prioritize analytical excellence alongside traditional military virtues. His presence at the briefing symbolizes continuity of institutional commitment to cultural competence that will influence military effectiveness for decades to come. The young officer's questions demonstrate sophisticated understanding of analytical methodologies that have become standard curriculum in military education programs worldwide, reflecting successful institutionalization of capabilities that were once considered experimental innovations. The Global Impact Assessment presented during the briefing documents adoption of cultural intelligence training by 67 nations whose military organizations have implemented modified versions of programs developed at Fort Blackwater. The international cooperation has created networks of analytical expertise that enhance collective security through shared understanding of cultural factors that influence conflict development and resolution. The worldwide application of Sarah's methodologies represents American leadership in military innovation that strengthens Allied capabilities while advancing shared security interests through sophisticated engagement strategies. Colonel Williams, grandson of the sergeant major who first recognized Sarah's potential, delivers analysis of educational programs that prepare future military leaders for complex operational environments where cultural competence determines mission effectiveness. His research documents transformation of military academies and training institutions that now emphasize analytical sophistication alongside traditional military skills and officer development programs. The educational evolution represents institutional recognition that modern military leadership requires intellectual capabilities that complement rather than replace warrior traditions essential for national defense. The memorial tribute included in the briefing honors former Colonel Henley, whose personal transformation from skeptical traditionalist to advocate for analytical excellence demonstrated institutional capacity for growth and adaptation. His legacy includes leadership development programs that encourage professional humility and willingness to learn from diverse sources of expertise, regardless of their institutional position or apparent authority. The tribute acknowledges how individual courage to admit mistakes and embrace change can influence organizational culture in ways that enhance effectiveness while preserving core values essential for military service. Sarah's presentation concludes with recommendations for continued evolution of cultural intelligence capabilities to address emerging challenges that include space operations, cyber warfare, and hybrid conflicts that blur traditional boundaries between military and civilian domains. Her strategic vision encompasses development of analytical methodologies that can navigate technological complexity while maintaining human-centered approaches essential for ethical application and cultural sensitivity. The recommendations represent continued innovation that builds upon established foundations while adapting to changing security environments that require sophisticated analytical capabilities. The standing ovation that follows her presentation reflects recognition from the nation's senior military leadership that analytical excellence has become indispensable for American security in a world where cultural factors increasingly determine strategic outcomes. The applause acknowledges not only individual achievement but institutional transformation that has enhanced military effectiveness while preserving values essential for democratic societies. The moment represents culmination of a career devoted to demonstrating that intellectual sophistication strengthens rather than weakens military capability when properly integrated with traditional warrior skills. The afternoon ceremony, dedicating the Cultural Intelligence Operations Center, includes participation from international allies, academic partners, and former students whose careers have been shaped by training programs Sarah developed over 3 decades of service. The diversity of participants reflects global recognition that cultural competence has become essential for military effectiveness in an interconnected world where local conflicts can escalate into international crises through misunderstanding and inappropriate responses. The ceremony celebrates achievement while acknowledging continuing responsibility to develop capabilities that serve broader purposes than individual or institutional advancement. The retirement reception held in Sarah's honor brings together representatives from every organization that has been influenced by her work, creating a gathering that spans generations of military and civilian personnel whose careers have been enhanced through cultural intelligence training. The conversations that occurred during the reception demonstrate lasting impact of analytical methodologies that continue evolving through application and research conducted by institutions worldwide. The event represents transition from individual leadership to institutional capability that will continue advancing American security interests through sophisticated understanding of cultural factors that determine modern conflict outcomes. The final moment of the ceremony occurs when Sarah passes command of the Cultural Intelligence Operations Center to her successor, symbolically transferring responsibility for continued development of analytical capabilities that have become central to American military effectiveness. The transition represents institutional maturation that has moved beyond dependence on individual expertise toward comprehensive capabilities that enhance national security through sophisticated understanding of human behavior and cultural dynamics that shape international relations in an increasingly complex world. The sun sets over the Pentagon as Sarah steps out of the building for the final time in uniform, her reflection captured in the polished granite memorial wall that bears the names of those who transformed military thinking through courage and innovation. In her hand, she carries a worn photograph from that first day at Fort Blackwater. The young woman dismissed as too emotional, now recognized as the architect of military evolution that saved countless lives through analytical excellence rather than brute force. A young captain approaches, seeking guidance for her first assignment to cultural intelligence operations. Sarah's advice echoes across 3 decades. Never let anyone tell you that thinking deeply makes you weak. The greatest warriors are those who understand that true strength lies in protecting others through wisdom, not just weapons. As her car pulls away from the Pentagon, Sarah's phone buzzes with a message from a former student now commanding operations in a distant theater. Your methodology just prevented another war. 3 nations found peaceful resolution through cultural understanding rather than military confrontation. Thank you for teaching us that the mind is our most powerful weapon. The final image shows the bronze plaque outside the Cultural Intelligence Operations Center, dedicated to those who proved that intellectual courage changes the world more profoundly than physical force alone. If this story of transformation and triumph inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community of over 2.8 million viewers who believe in the power of hidden potential. Bell. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated because of who you appeared to be? Your story might be our next feature. Like this video if Sarah's journey reminded you that true strength comes from unexpected places, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their unique talents matter, even when others can't see them yet. What other incredible stories of hidden heroes would you like us to explore next?